Hey, Toronto. How is it that we all live in the same city, but some people get to live around spaces that look like this, while others have to deal with spaces that look like that? Today, I want you to realize that these differences in the built environment don't just occur naturally. Your city council is largely responsible for what your neighborhood looks like. More than any other level of government, your city council shapes what your day looks like, how it feels. Small things. How soon after a big snowfall you can expect to see your sidewalk again? If you have to walk around with an empty coffee cup in your hand because the garbage cans are always full in your neighborhood. But also bigger, more impactful things. What your commute looks like. What kind of housing is accessible to you, and for what price? How much dust, noise, and air pollution you're exposed to every day. If you can let your kids walk to school, or not a chance in the world. I want you to take a minute here to think about your own personal experience of the city. How do you feel on your street? Which words would you use to describe your neighborhood? Safe, green, conducive to social interaction, or not at all? Overall, do you relate more to the person on the left or the person on the right? If you tell me your income, I can make a pretty good prediction as to what your answer will be. The reason why it's possible to make an educated guess about your personal experience of the city is that good things and bad things are not distributed randomly across neighborhoods. And as a result, the good outcomes and the bad outcomes are not distributed randomly either. Let me give you examples. In the city of Toronto, children born in low-income neighborhoods are much more likely to develop asthma. Why? In part, because poorer neighborhoods tend to have higher levels of traffic-related air pollution, and that is a known trigger for respiratory disease. At the other end of that spectrum, kids who grow up around a variety of trees are largely protected when it comes to developing allergies later in life. Where we grow up, which destinations are accessible to us, what we are exposed to every day, it all matters for our health. Our built environment matters for our safety too. In cities all across North America, pedestrian injuries happen disproportionately often where there is a high concentration of low-income and minority communities. Right here in the city of Toronto. School-age children are 5.4 times more likely to be hit by a car when they're walking in a low-income area as compared to a higher income area. In the city of Montreal, they're looking at 6.3 times more pedestrian injuries in the poorest census areas. Does this mean that being poor makes you a bad driver? Or a reckless pedestrian? Obviously, that's not the answer. The answer is that speed limits tend to be higher in poorer neighborhoods. Roads tend to be in worse state of repair. And traffic calming features, like speed bumps, are much less common. Overall, lower income neighborhoods are just less safe in how they're built. But why? How can we explain these discrepancies between neighborhoods? Are there people in power somewhere at City Hall who are actively and intentionally seeking to make the public space worse for some of us? I don't believe so. What I do believe, however, is that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. There are two main ways in which people are invited to interact with their city government. That's 311 and public consultations. I believe a big contributing factor to urban inequality is that not everyone in our society is equally likely to use those communication channels. Let's talk about 311 first. The 311 is a non-emergency phone number that you can call to ask your city government to fix or improve something for you. This can be a broken sidewalk, a pothole, or even a request for a new pedestrian crossing to be installed on your street. And as I say this, I am 100% sure that many of you in the room are learning that this service exists just now. Show of hands if you've never heard of 311 before. That's almost everyone. This is the first deadly sin of the 311. A good chunk of the population just doesn't know about it. There is also mounting evidence coming from cities in the United States that low-income and minority communities are disproportionately not calling 311 even when they live near infrastructure that is objectively in poor condition. The research doesn't exist yet for Canada, so I decided to crunch some numbers myself. I looked at a full month of 311 requests received by the City of Montreal. What I found was very much in line with those American studies. Over that 1 month period, the richest areas of the city generated about 30 requests per 1,000 residents. In comparison, there were only 18 requests per 1,000 residents in the poorest census areas. Ultimately, what we're seeing is that the 311 service seems to be underused by those who likely need it the most. Now to the second communication channel, this. In theory, public consultations are meant to allow the general public to have a say in the development of their community. I have personally attended many public consultations in my life, probably too many. In my experience, people who go to consultations tend to have a whole lot in common. Your typical participant has a good amount of free time, a good mastery of the language, a higher than average level of interest in political issues, and most importantly, maybe, a feeling, a sense that they belong in that kind of space. That's not most people, is it? And when we're not hearing from most people, the problem is that we're getting a very distorted picture of what the community wants and needs. For both 311 and public consultations, the loudest people, and not necessarily those who have greater needs, tend to get more for their neighborhood. More speed bumps, more repairs, more attention, and ultimately, their concerns are just more likely to be addressed. So where do we go from here? How do we correct inequalities in the built environment when we know that the communication channels we have are likely perpetuating inequalities? I don't know about you, but I have limited bandwidth for people who bring problems to my attention and then have zero solutions to propose. So I came up with 3 steps in the right direction that I believe any major city in Canada could take right now to become more equitable. My recommendations are based on 2 years of research right here at the University of Toronto, more than 10 interviews with city staff across the country, and 40 hours a week working as a social equity consultant. The first step is to fix the mechanisms of participation. I want to see cities start collecting data about who attends public consultations. If it turns out that traditional consultations never attract a representative sample of residents, then we need to start making changes. Maybe it means providing childcare for the duration of the event, having interpretation services on site, or even providing some form of financial compensation, like transportation vouchers, for people who really need it. Maybe it means focusing on easier, more intuitive ways to participate, like taking community walks, where people can actually show issues directly to decision makers. The first step towards a more equitable city is making sure you're getting feedback from your entire community and not just some groups of people. To be fair here, I know many cities are working on improving their consultation practices and are looking to bring the people we never hear from to the table. But this first step, it's the easy one. It's the least controversial one, too. There is no opposition to making democracy more inclusive. When we start talking about how we allocate resources, though, the conversation becomes much more difficult. The second step is to monitor differences between neighborhoods. Every piece of evidence that I introduced to you today about road collisions and speed bumps and 311 requests, all of it came from scientific studies. I want to see cities start assessing their own social equity performance urgently. We can't fix what we don't know. Every major city in the country should know which neighborhoods, but also which groups of people are disproportionately experiencing burdens like potholes, poor transit service, crumbling rental buildings, air pollution, respiratory disease, and the list goes on. On top of assessing how these bad conditions are distributed, I want to see cities monitor the level of service they provide across neighborhoods. I'm talking how much money is invested where, how many public consultations are hosted, how many repairs are conducted. At the end of this whole process, I want to see cities publicly report on how well they serve different communities. The second step towards a more equitable city is being aware of and transparent about inequalities. Once cities know which neighborhoods are disproportionately dealing with burdens, I believe they have a responsibility to intervene, to take them from here to here. This is the third step. Consider needs when allocating resources. To be clear here, I'm not advocating for pouring the entire city budget in underserved areas and letting the roads collapse in more privileged neighborhoods. That's not my point. What I'm saying is, cities can and should consider equity when they prioritize their work. Let's imagine we have 100 roads that are in similar condition, and we know they all need to be repaired within the next 10 years. What I'm saying is, maybe we should start in the poorest areas where people are less likely to complain about the roads, but more likely to be killed or injured on them. The smartest part about this final step is that you don't need more money. Cities can improve social outcomes just by reconsidering how they prioritize the work they're already doing. I sincerely hope that some of these recommendations will resonate with city councilors and mayors all across the country. While we wait for them to start implementing these changes, or at the very least, give me a call about it, or whatever. There are things that you can do as an individual. I encourage all of you to use the communication channels you have at your disposal, especially if before today, you had no idea that you could just ask your city government to improve your daily life. So next time you cross a dangerous intersection, slip on an icy sidewalk, or even just have to deal with a pile of garbage on your street, call 311. Or better yet, go tell your city councilor. Remember, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.